Hey everyone, we're Daniel Nicole Hernandez, pastor and worship leader in Columbus, Ohio.
Hola a todos, somos Daniel y Nicole Hernández, pastor y líder de adoración en Columbus, Ohio.
From September 15th to October 15th is Hispanic Heritage Month, and to celebrate, we want to share an exciting new project of Vineyard Worship. But before, we want to let you know that we have a National Association gathering coming up April 15th to the 18th called Better Together. Registration is opening soon, so be on the lookout and save the date. Recently, we have been working with Vineyard Worship to organize and increase resources for Spanish-speaking and bilingual churches.
Recientemente, hemos estado trabajando con Vineyard Worship para incrementar recursos para iglesias de habla hispana y bilingüe.
We have a new Spanish translation team with representatives from all over the U.S. and Latin America, and we are working to translate songs in a way that will work for the majority of our Spanish-speaking churches.
Hemos formado un nuevo equipo de traducción al español con representantes de todos los Estados Unidos y Latinoamérica, y estamos trabajando para traducir canciones en una manera que funcione para la mayoría de nuestras iglesias de habla hispana.
There are now Spanish translations of many of our Vineyard songs, along with bilingual songs that have intentionally been written in both Spanish and English. You can find all our Spanish music under the name Adoración Viña, Vineyard in Español, on Spotify, Apple, Pandora, and more. You can find all these resources and more at vineyardworship.com/adoración and vineyardsongs.com. Links are in the show notes.
Puedes encontrar todos estos recursos y más en vineyardworship.com/adoración o vineyardsongs.com. Los enlaces están en las notas del episodio.
What up, Calum?
Well, hello there. Here's my Texas accent.
That sounds great.
It's good.
Sounds really good. It is so cool to have you on the podcast. What a great chance to meet. I had no idea you were going to be here at this event.
Yeah.
So for those of you who are listening, we're in England somewhere. I don't know where we're at, and
We're in the armpit of the area around Heathrow Airport.
correct. Said by an Englishman.
Yes, who grew up in the next town.
Okay, perfect. And we just happened to be connecting at a worship event here that the Vineyard Worship folks here in the UK are doing, and really, really happy to have you on.
Hello.
Calum, so let's just do this.
Yeah.
Let's just jump right in. Give us like origin story stuff.
Yeah, so
Like where are you from and what happened when you were a kid? And
I am the product of, well, let's just stick to this generation and the one before me. So I am the product of South Wales mining town, the home of Tom Jones.
the Tom Jones?
The Tom Jones, which comes into my family line a bit later on.
Yeah.
But so the Tom Jones, yeah. So mining villages, steelworks, and that was the life. That's blue collar, hardworking.
Yes.
Amazing character.
Yes.
Will give you the shirt off their back.
Yes.
Very
Strange
vain.
language.
Strange language.
Funny names.
Lots of vowels. Lots of.
Yeah, how does it even happen? I
look.
look at the street signs when I'm in Wales and I go, I don't.
That's right.
It's Elvish.
It is. It's where Tolkien got the invitation to create his own one. I think was probably something to do with he went to Wales once.
Had to be.
I thought I can do better than that.
Had to be.
Yeah,
Okay, so you grew up in a mining town.
Well, that's my origins. So mum and dad moved down to London before I was born because of dad's work.
All right.
And I grew up in the next town to here, just a few minutes away. So it's for me, I went to Canada 2006. It's now, 2023?
Yeah.
It's been a few years. And so this has been a unexpected emotional return in terms of music and my own part in creating spaces of worship. To come full circle. So origin story, okay, I'll speed that one up. So dad got out of the mining and the coal mining kind of cycle by being a drummer. He was working in a shoe shop and a local guitarist came in and dad knew that band had just lost their drummer. So dad said, as a 15-year-old, I think he was, need a drummer? Or probably said it more like, need a drummer, do you?
Yeah.
You missing one of you? Right, well, I play a bit. Do you? He had the audition that night, got the gig.
Had he ever played drums before?
He played, as far as I know, he played in what we call marching band.
Yeah.
So Boys Brigade.
Yeah.
And the kit he stole from his brother, It was his brother's kit.
Yeah.
He did the audition with this local band, and he got the gig and was gigging that weekend. And Tommy Scott and the Senators was the name of the outfit.
And what year would this have been?
This would be mid-60s, I think.
Okay, yeah, that's the name of that band feels very 60s.
Yeah. So then here comes the fun bit.
Yeah.
They get signed, and Dad can fill me in with the correct details if he
That's
can
right.
remember. They get signed. They're a band that gets signed, doing local clubs and stuff, and they get signed by Decca Records in London.
Yes.
And the exec there says, Tommy Scott and the Senators, it's not a good ring. He just finished reading a book that was the #1 bestseller called Tom Jones.
Get out.
And so Tommy Scott and the Senators became Tom Jones and the Squires.
Get out.
And started touring. So Dad hit Vegas at the age of 18, 19, I think.
Okay, but you and Mom are home.
I'm not even on the scene yet.
Oh, you're not on the scene
This is
yet.
my origin story.
Yeah. So this is your dad is coming around.
So my roots are Welsh. So I would say, Joyce, my wife, would say, you're a Welshman who grew up in England.
Yeah.
Which, still makes me great. No, I'm Welsh through and through. Well, actually, no, I just grew up down the road in England. So
Yeah.
So it's kind of, had Dad stayed in the mining communities and blue collar and not followed his heart and the rhythm that was in him. Later found out my grandfather was a soft shoe shuffle dancer.
And what does that mean?
Which is like tap dancing.
Yeah.
But in clubs.
Yeah, rhythm.
And rhythm.
Again, back to rhythm.
Back to rhythm. So rhythm's been in the family. My brother's a drummer. Uncle's a drummer. Dad stole the drum kit from my uncle for his audition.
Correct.
And
you're a drummer.
And I'm a drummer.
I know.
And then, in honor of Grampy, in honor of my granddad, I had tap dancing lessons during the COVID-itis period.
Okay.
I thought, I've got to get in. This is coming out somehow. There's no gigging.
Yeah.
I'm tapping.
Okay, so your dad's a drummer. When did you start playing drums, though? Did you want to, or was it always in the house? Was music in the house?
Dad being a professional musician, professional touring drummer, never had kit drums at home.
Get out.
His drums were always in the lockup.
Okay.
They were always at the studio.
Yeah.
So there was a few things. My dad would have a guitar lying around, and so we'd have that. But we didn't have drum sets. We didn't have a practice room. We didn't have like a little studio space like we might do today.
Yeah.
He wasn't doing online sessions. Where he
it's
played
not
music,
possible.
Where he played music was in front of people.
Yeah.
And they used to take the bus with the drums. And my mum and dad would take the bus on the drums on the bus even.
Yeah.
And get to gigs. And that's how they would do it.
Yeah.
So they get signed. They make it big. So that's 69, 68. Something. I'm born in 71. Dad's then playing with a band called Man from Man's Earth Band, who have a couple of #1 hits. Davy's on the Road Again, written by someone else. And so they're doing that. So I grew up knowing a lot about live music, knowing a lot about the life of a musician, or so I thought.
Yes.
Forgetting that what Dad's doing is 1% of all the musicians in the world.
Yeah.
I just thought to be a musician is you make hit records and tour.
Yeah, you run around with Tom Jones.
Yeah, you're hanging out.
There's a bus, and people
That's right.
scream for you, and
as
your songs are on the radio.
As a little kid, we'd go to the venue or we go to the studio, and I was given free reign to be a little 3-year-old, 2-year-old, wandering around, getting lost in theatres. The complete Spinal Tap moment, which way to the stage. And then Calum's gone, where's Calum? Where's Calum? And the APB and the crew are looking for Calum. And so I used to know the crew really well. That was my family on the road. It was Mum and the crew.
Yeah, because you're just around all the time. They're with you.
Yeah. Uncle Alan, guitar tech, and that's how it was. That was the life. And then my sister was born when I was 4. Yeah. And Mum said, all right, enough's enough. Now we're home. So then through the touring life, Mum and Dad divorced when I was 8 or 9, around 10 or something. So going back to your question of when did I start, I'd always been around drums, didn't really have drums at home, felt rhythm's in me. I think it's been, as it's been said, or prayed over me, that generations of rhythm have gone before me, and there's been a fight to get it into the kingdom. It's always been missing the mark a little bit. So to use it towards worship was a new thing for my family line. So it's an interesting space to inhabit. So then when I start playing as a secondary school, we call it over here junior high, I guess, 12, 13, it's because the drummer of the band, I wasn't in band, didn't enroll in music, he was missing, and they had
this is exactly like your dad's story.
Right.
The guy didn't show up.
The guy didn't show up.
Call Calum.
That's right. Anyone play drums? Well, Calum plays a bit. Get him in. Has he got any drums? No. All right. School kit will do. And I get up there.
This is exactly, you didn't have your kit. Your dad didn't have a kit. He stole a kit. Somebody's out. Your dad comes in. Someone's out. Calum comes in. This is some spooky symmetry.
It's kind of fun. I haven't thought of it in that way.
My gosh,
good,
that's like...
Wow, look at that.
Like if you put this in a novel, the editor takes that out and says, No one believes that.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
No, that is too good.
So then the first gigs are on the back of flatbed trucks doing village shows, and we're doing Stevie covers and Aretha covers and, top 40 hits and whatever else. We're just doing popular music. So then I then think, drums. I like this. I like this experience of making people smile with music and me bashing away at the back, having the vantage point of seeing everything that's going on the stage, everything that's going on with the crew, everything that's going on with the audience, and being able to change something in the atmosphere there, to engage people or to play something that smacks them up the head.
Right.
It's just drums and percussion are fantastic for that.
They
you don't
are.
got to worry about the key. You can start, you can stop immediately. Your volume is very loud to very quiet. You've got all the controls that you need.
The dynamic range is infinite almost.
Yeah. So lots of stories we go with that. But to be in this place of music. So then, do I want to be a drummer? No, I don't want to be a drummer because the life of a drummer costs your family. So I don't want to do that.
So that's the meaning you made.
Yeah, that was my little connection.
Young kid.
All this is all well and good.
Yeah.
But I don't know. So I started getting into production. We didn't have a way of recording it at school. So we had a Tascam 4-track cassette multi-track machine.
Yeah.
And so we set up our studio in the broom cupboard next door.
Yeah.
And I just started recording and learning how to do that. That led to me working at a local studio as a radio editor.
And what did that mean?
That meant putting together jingles and any content they were pre-recording for radio, splicing it with half-inch.
That's what I'm saying.
Stereo tape.
Because it's not digital.
There's nothing digital yet.
Yeah, you're like looking.
Yeah.
You're rolling the tape,
finding it, marking
make a cut.
it. That's it. 40-degree cut, 60-degree cut, straight across. Get the trailer in. 30-second white tape in between because that's the run. That.
Yeah.
So all of that was my schooling. So analog, I understand.
Yes.
So then at 15, 16, I do what I need to do to finish school, and I get a job with a record company as a house engineer. So Virgin Records, I joined them. And the very first session...
How is a company like Virgin hiring a 16-year-old boy? Like that,
well, because you can leave school...
in my ears, that feels so strange.
Yeah, 16, you can leave school at 16 here.
Okay.
In the UK.
Okay.
So I didn't do what we call A-levels, which are high school equivalent, I guess.
Yes.
So which is you finish at 18, right? High school? Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So most people who want to be educated will finish school at 18 and then go to college and do that. So I left 16.
You were just like, I'm a muso.
I'm just like, I don't think I'm going to be college material.
Yeah.
So
I'm not going to be a doctor.
No, I'm not going to be a doctor. I'm not going to be really academic in my approach to life. It's more visceral for me. Later on, that's changed. But so I had this job. I just went for the audition, which was, can you splice a tape?
And yes, I have those skills.
Yes,
I'm actually
good. So that was it. And the very first session I had there was this just crazy session of these top line session musicians. And so they set the standard for me. And I thought that was how you do music in the recording world.
Yeah, you thought this is how it goes.
This is how it goes.
Yeah.
And I just missed Rush recording Hold Your Fire in this studio. When I got there, the flight cases were still there. And Neil Peart just being,
And what year is this?
This would be 86, something like that, 87, 88, somewhere around that, mid to late 80s.
I love this.
So rocking. And then I had this session with a band that were not the A-list session musicians.
Yes.
Who did the classic rock and roll thing. They spent all their money and their time on not making music.
Is that code for drugs?
Drugs and guns and
so you're like 16 and there's just some dudes in the studio doing drugs and going through their advance.
Here's my funniest drug story.
Yes, I love this already.
So we had 2-inch tape machines, 2 Studers.
Yes.
Hooked up, so you get 48 tracks of simultaneous recording. Well, you get 46 because you have to do 2 of those channels for the SMPTE code, which locks the machines together. Anyway, so we have these tape machines, and tape machines are beasts. You have to line them up every day. You have to clean them every day. They take a lot to make them work right. The azimuth control for every of those channels, it's just, oh my goodness. So I'm cleaning the tape machine one day, and you put a little compound of talcum powder on it. You put a little isopropyl alcohol, and you make a little mixture on there. You paste it onto the heads, and it bubbles away and cleans any oxide residue that's on there. Unbeknownst to me, I knocked over the little talcum powder pot with that, but unbeknownst to me, a guy had lined up lines of coke on the end of the SSL. And I just sweep it all in. Oh no, I can't waste it. So I put it all back in the bottle.
Yeah.
So I'm cleaning heads with dubious white powder.
Yes, cocaine. This is well. But what else would you use?
Well,
it's the studio. It's the 80s.
It
man.
must be in the budget.
It was the 80s.
So I'm living this. I've left home. I'm living at this residential studio. Good crew there for the most part. Again, the crew were the ones that became my family. So the chef, Simon the chef, housekeepers, gardener, Richard the gardener. We became tight knit. So we're rolling along, and so I'm playing drums every now and again. So another important part of this story, actually, for me, as I'm working, I eventually finished working at Virgin Records when I'm 21, and the reason for that was a friend at school, Stuart, invited me along to a youth group. We're doing a music production. I think you'll like it, and it happened to be a mixture of semi-pro or very good amateur musicians and actors. And it was associated with this youth group, and they did a national tour, and it was good quality. And that kind of hooked me in. Oh, these guys know what they're doing with music. This is good. Turns out it's a Christian youth group.
Yeah.
So I'm there for years, trusting people, trusting the space, learning about the church, learning about Jesus, learning about God, but trusting my friends around me and learning to trust
this is
again.
your introduction to faith.
Yeah, this is 13, 14.
Yeah.
We all have an introduction to faith in the UK. We all grew up at assembly, saying the Lord's Prayer, singing the national anthem, and listening to Cat Stevens' Morning Has Broken. They literally wheel out a vinyl, record player, drop the needle, and we'd listen and sing along to Morning Has Broken by Cat Stevens.
Get out.
So that was kind of spiritual formation. I guess another origin part of this is being Welsh. Life and church are very close-knit.
Yes.
Doesn't matter who Jesus is. Community and church, that goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
And so it helps if you know Jesus to do that. But life revolves around your community, and your community will go to worship together in church.
So does the ghost of Evan Roberts still haunt?
Have you seen the episode of, what's the BBC show they made, The Crown?
My wife watched that series.
So everyone needs to go to see, I don't know what series it's in, but there was a mining disaster in my part of Wales where a slag heap, which is the rubbish bit of coal you can't use, they made a mountain out of it, bigger than it should have been, it collapsed, and it slid down the mountain and took out a village school. 170 or so people died in it, the kids, and my uncle was worked at the pit where it came from. So they're all hands on deck. But The Crown depict this, and it's incredible because of the subject matter, but it's incredible how they do it. But the bit that really got me was, and the bit that is reported Prince Philip was really affected by, was the sense of community coming and sharing their grief through a shared hymn, and they sing a hymn together. So it doesn't matter where your personal story is with Jesus. Everyone
just around
is. So Wales being a town, a country of tall tales and poetry and music. To be born Welsh is not to be born privileged, but to be born with music in your blood and poetry in your soul. There's a much longer poem that comes from it. And so you hold on to that. It's almost like the Chain Gang. Life is hard, so we sing.
That's right.
Life is good, so we sing.
Well,
life is disastrous, so we sing.
Isn't it interesting that the best music usually comes from the most disaffected people?
Yeah, well, we have to have something pressurizing us. We have to have some tension to create energy, because if everything's going well, there's less tension. But the tension actually, it's quite amazing what can happen.
I mean, there's a reason why jazz comes from New Orleans.
I learned in my lessons with tap dancing, I just like the rhythmic aspect of it. But I've yet since learned it's actually protest dance from the black community.
Say more. That is cool.
And the way that you would show your protest for how you're being treated is to entertain the snot out of people and to share your story through the art of tap dancing.
Resistance.
Yeah. Yeah, like gumboot dancing in South Africa, or chain gang, or it's this act of resistance towards something. But they're not doing like for like. They're creating beauty out of this incredibly hard Tolkien coming up with this incredible work of art, fueled by the horror of war.
Yes,
and
so this is there's something about this. This the Welsh story.
Yeah, there's something about the. We're being oppressed again. Great.
Yeah.
Sing, boys.
That's right. Right.
We're all in this together. One
Right.
for all and all for nothing. Right,
Yes.
let's go.
So you have an introduction to faith because
So-
at about 13, your friend
13,
says,
14,
"Come with me."
And so I'm part of the youth group, the Focus youth group. And the guy who's leading it, he is not hip. Roger Casson, we jokingly would say he's the tallest man in the world. He would be 6'7", 6'8",
Yeah.
but looked big.
Yeah.
We'd go kayaking, and we'd all be kayaking, and we'd pull up, and we'd get out one by one, and we would make sure Roger was the last one to get out, because he would just keep getting out.
Yeah.
There's more of him coming out of his kayak. We're
That's
like,
right.
Where does all that go?
That's right.
And he was a prep school teacher, a private school teacher.
Yeah.
Top hat, gown.
What?
Top hat, you'd be over 7 feet tall. He collected gramophone records. He had a pianola pump action. He'd put the roll in, but he'd joke around. Yeah, I can play piano, and he's pumping his feet and the thing's
Yes.
going. We clubbed together. We bought him a CD player. What do you want for music, Rog? I like Elvis and something classical. Awesome. We play the CD. He goes, oh yeah, that's nice. He goes, open. He turns the CD over. He puts it in and press play.
Nothing.
Why is the second side not playing? Just not used to handwrite letters, type letters to us.
From another age.
From another age, right. So from that ministry that he led, there must be hundreds of kids that are now in full-time ministry. Totally not hip to the culture.
So what was his magnetism?
Someone who was true, who could be trusted, someone who was consistent, was totally himself, didn't chase the next thing, wasn't worried about church growth, wasn't worried about all the church things. Now I'm on the pastoral side, the things that get thrown up at you. We're creating space. It was a lesson learned, it was a value learned, and a space to trust.
Okay, so did you keep your faith through your high school years, even when you were at Virgin Studios?
So it was growing hand in hand. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a number of musicians who are very good at what they do, who are Jesus followers. And
So you kept meeting people along the way.
So this first, I'll drop some names. This very first session when I arrive at Virgin Records, we've got Nathan East on bass. We've got Greg Fillinganes on keys, J.R. Robinson on drums, Dan Huff on electric. And the producer is Humberto Gatica, who was Quincy Jones's engineer, but is a Grammy Award producer. And so I'm there, pimply 16-year-old, and Humberto says, "So you're gonna run the session?" I'm like, "Well, I'm new in, Mr. Gatica. He said, "Well, do you know how to run this desk?" I said, "I'm learning." Great, that's all we need. He said, "First of all, what is the desk?" Oh, it's an SSL-G series.
Yes.
It's 144 inputs. And it was amazing because there's a compressor and a gate on each channel, and an EQ and a routing system.
Yes.
You don't have that. And it's like, this is, what?
Yes.
So I'm learning this, and he's showing me how to set up microphones.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there with Nathan East going, "What pickup are you using, mate?"
Yeah.
You know, and I'm talking to Dan Huff, and Dan had 2 wardrobes full of gear.
Yeah.
Everything. But he did the whole session through a Rockman on his hip. He had a Strat and a Rockman. And I said, "Dan, what?" At the end of one of the things, "Dan, what are we ever going to use this gear?" He goes, No. The gear gets me the gig, but the playing keeps me in it.
Get
It's
out.
just these things. So he had these wardrobes of stuff that had all the latest gizmos,
But he wouldn't use it.
He just had his guitar that he loved, and it's all in the fingers.
There we go.
So these guys, and all of these guys, we have little prayer sessions every now and again.
Really?
Someone will call and get some news from someone, and they stop in the middle of this top 40 thing. I later learned that the artist, a singer called Clark Datchler, he was the singer for a band called Johnny Hates Jazz, and this was his solo album. So that was my first ever session, and I went from that to the antithesis of that, just at the snap of fingers. I cleaned up that session, and then hell came in the door.
Yeah, that's right.
And it was, this is not that.
Yeah.
So all the way through this, I've got friends who are keeping in touch with me. They'll come up to the studio, see it every now and again, because it's it's an amazing. It's a 12th century manor house north of Oxford, with
So
a go-kart
fun.
track.
Get out.
And everyone records there. Tubular Bells was the first big album that was recorded there. Mike Oldfield. So it's a proper place. Yeah. So I live and work there, and then I'm going back to the youth group, learning bits about Jesus. We're starting to minister. We're starting to see people set free of stuff. But it's really a place to belong beyond all things. And I'm seeing a growing gap between my life of music and what it could be, and the trajectory that I'm on, versus being healthy in myself. I think I could have been a really good, successful engineer, but I don't know what it would have cost me to do that. I don't know what it would, where I would be at this point, 52 years old, married, 2 kids. I don't know how healthy that would look. I can't even imagine it.
Those are really mature thoughts to have as a young man.
I think I have one of my foundational things. 9 years old, I'm playing drums. I think it was Dad's Tom kit he used for Tom. He was out on a road somewhere, so I went around his house and stole it from his garage. Again, stealing things from stealing the drums so I can do it. And my buddy Philip, who was a piano player, we would have been 8, 9 years old. Yeah, this is coming back to me, man. So he played piano. It's easier to move drums than it is to move a piano.
Right.
So I moved the drums down to his house. He's at the other end of the street. So we're carrying them one by one. And we put Dire Straits' Love Over Gold on. And we just play the whole thing in his front room.
Right.
We put on some Led Zepp and we play the whole album from start to finish. We put whatever's on the turntable, we learn to play it. And we spent hours and hours and hours doing it, and I'm super happy. And then tragedy strikes the family. Philip's mum died, then the next year his brother died, then the next year he died, all of the same congenital heart defect. So I didn't...
And you're 9?
I would have been 11 when Philip died. And,
okay.
So
it started at 9 and he died at 11.
So this was our little music club we had together for 3 years. And I didn't trust, first of all, I didn't trust family. Mum and Dad had split up, so I didn't trust the place of family. And then I definitely couldn't trust best friends because they die on you. That's my story.
And this is all happening kind of at the same time because you said your parents split when you were 8, right?
Yeah, 8. Yep. So that whole
8, then you meet
12,
Philip.
13.
Yeah, a lot of loss.
Yeah, a lot of loss.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really know how to cope with that. I didn't know I needed to cope with it because you're just getting on with life. I don't know. No one's telling me. So I find music. This is when I find the drumming part. And it's this expression of connection with people. And I think that's why it made so much sense to me, is that there's a cause and effect that's very real. So learning to trust people through the youth group experience. And it was then when I was 21. I was 20 years old. We used to do a little youth retreat. Every Easter, we'd go and rent a college. They were away, so we'd rent it, and we'd have a retreat, youth retreat, basically. 150 of us, 200 of us or something, with all the mums and dads helping in the kitchen. That was always a bit of a weird one.
Yeah.
Because that's what families do, eh?
Yeah.
So then it was at that point with a kind of presentation of the gospel, if you like, where different faiths have aspects of Christianity. And this faith has that, this spirituality has that. And it left the void of the cross in the middle. But only Jesus encapsulates all of this.
Yes.
So that got me thinking. I was like, hang on a minute. There's something here about Jesus that I've missed in my formation. It's not actually the church that I should be worshipping and working for. There's something else missing here. And it wasn't like a Road to Damascus emotional thing. It just made sense.
Yeah,
Jesus is the key to this?
It pulled several stories together for you. Yeah,
and it was so Jesus makes sense. So then it's Jesus. That's what it is. So I go back, and there's a session that comes into the Manor. I go back there to the studio, and it's a couple of Christian guys in there again, some A-list session guys, and we're chatting away and in between takes or whatever, or just hanging out at the dinner table. And I say, I've got a question. It's not music related. I'm just trying to figure out the difference between Jesus and the church. And they kind of look at me and they go, oh, what's going on?
Yeah.
And they're older guys, and they're chatting away with me, and they say, well, if you give yourself to Jesus, then the church will follow. But it's sometimes quite hard for Jesus to get into the church. And I found, okay, so I guess it's about Jesus.
Yeah.
So then what happened after that was I didn't really have the passion for doing music. My worldview was starting to be changed a wee bit. If Jesus is the center of this thing, if Jesus is supposed to be the center of my life, and that's who I trust regardless of what happens in life, then how can I do that in this environment for me right now? Because I don't have the camaraderie around me to do it. There's no one alongside me. There's no one praying for me. I would go for walks in the grounds and have these experiences of God in the lawn or just going around by the river there. And I'd have these little solo moments. And right behind the Manor is a church, an old church. I think it's even decommissioned now, but I would spend hours in there through the broken door at the back and just have this solo thing. And it struck me, actually, if I want to, I need to have some kind of other expression where it's directly helping people. So I handed in my notice at Virgin Records, And I went straight from that to working for an NGO called Tear Fund, a third world relief and development agency. And I started in the accounts department. They quickly figured, you're not really an accountant. They put me in looking after orders, and then they figured, actually, I think you're good with people. So you can be on our exhibition team, and you can run the sound. And here's a moment for you which really confirmed it. I'm setting up the sound one day because we would get supporters of the ministry coming through. And this guy comes in and he starts singing this song that I kind of recognize. I go, oh, I think I've heard that song in church. Okay. And it was Rich Mullins.
Oh, man.
I'm just setting up the little sound thing. Beaker? What was his drummer's name? I think it was Beaker.
I don't know.
Man, yeah. And so I'm sitting away there, we're having a little chat, and I'm setting up his mic. He goes, okay, good, we're good to go. Do you play anything? I play a bit of drums and percussion. Great, yeah, you jump in as well. So I'm running sound, and there's about 100 people in the offices there. We're doing our Wednesday morning prayer time with Rich Mullins. It's only years later that I go, that was Rich Mullins.
That was an amazing moment.
What the?
Yeah.
That was stupid.
Yeah.
So, but feeling very normal with it. So then, jabbering away here, music for me has always been this place of finding myself, finding expression. I then left Tear Fund because Balwinder Kumar, an older Indian lady, put a music paper, the NME, New Musical Express, I think that's what it's called. Why she would have the NME, I have no idea. And she said, I saw this headline and I thought of you. Okay. And it said, do you want a degree in drumming, was the title. And she said, I think you need to do it. Okay, Balwinder, why is that? This isn't the place for you. God's got something else for you. I don't think this is where... I think it's been good. I think you've learned a lot, but I think you can stand up on your own now. And so I did the audition, got the place at the University of Westminster, doing a degree in commercial music. We were the first of its kind in the country. Since then, there's School of Arts, there's Brit School, there's Liverpool Performing Arts, I think, the Paul McCartney School. But that was to go from a 2-3-year-old running around backstage and tour buses and hanging out with your friends whose parents are on-stage people, and you see them on paper on TVs, and knowing the crew, knowing the family, finding not being able to trust family because of they leave or they die.
Right.
And then finding a community in my youth, and then finding a community through studio practice and getting some trusted friends there, and then finding worldview is flipped upside down. We need to help people. We're all going the same way. We need to help each other. How do we do that in a more than making records for people? How do we actually feed people? How do we actually keep people alive? That's more to the point. And then do my degree in music at University of Westminster. At the end of my degree, they asked me to join the teaching staff for a year, so I did that and helped run the studios there. And then post then was freelance as a musician.
Right.
So there was, through my time at the college, one of the things that they would do is how do we critique one another's music? Critique was never a critique. Critique was license to kill.
Yeah. Because
there's only so many points that our marker is going to give us. So you have to outkill somebody else to get those marks. So you think Simon Cowell, and everyone goes, what a bad guy.
Yeah.
Amp that up because you're trying to get a grade. And it was just this insipid, cutting down environment. And yet there was a couple of people in there who had faith. We're our little Christian club, and we would support one another however we could. We come to the end of the year show, and the end of this year show is booked at a club called Heaven, just under Charing Cross Station. It's one of the biggest gay clubs in Europe. It's got multiple stages, multiple arenas, and I really felt challenged. I'm just going to do a night of worship in here, because all the other musicians, when you get good musicians to playing, they can play gospel. Mm-hmm. So Muiwa Oluwaju, big shout out to Mui, the Mighty Atom. I think he's OBE now, or MBE, one of those. He's been something. He's got some letters after his name. Premier Radio sang with Brian Dirksen on the Queen song that was released over here.
Yeah,
he was finding his way there, and we end up doing this thing at Heaven, this club called Heaven. And I'm like, well, the obvious thing. The way that was marked was if you sell more beer than the other venue, you get extra points. They gave me the smallest bar right in the very fourth floor, out the way of nowhere.
Yeah.
And I enrolled all the musicians to play at some point that wanted to become a worship team, basically. We've got some killer vocalists.
Yeah.
And people are coming up to this thing. And we're doing old spirituals, we're doing Amazing Grace, we're doing some contemporary stuff. We're doing,
Yes.
But more and more people were coming up as couples and crying because they used to go to church with their grandma and they're missing their grandma.
Yeah.
And we have this whole night of worship.
You touched that
happening.
community thing again.
Yeah, again, it was seeing the power of music. No one's preaching. There was people there definitely not following Jesus, but being caught up in the moment of here. And lo and behold, we sold the most beer.
Amazing.
So look at that.
It must have been vineyard people.
Must have been vineyard people.
That's how you know.
This is how I ended up in the vineyard. I knew this was a marker for me.
That's it. So Calum, tell me, how did you run into the vineyard?
So here we go. 1996, I graduate. I'm working 1997 at the college.
Yeah.
I am also starting to get little depths in London's West End. I loved the idea of playing in a pit band. I absolutely loved this expression of something so developed and creative, but fixed and repeat, because your creativity didn't know any bounds until you fixed this thing, and then you need to repeat it so that more people can experience this theatre experience. So I snuck into a couple of theatres and just sat next to the drummer and would learn the chart, and then I would take on some holiday dates, because like any well, if you don't know, but you get a year's contract if you're going to be a pit band drummer or a pit band musician, and it can become pretty boring. And if you have a family, you want to go on holiday every now and again. So I would pick up some sick dates or some holiday time and start to learn the ways of the show. Wasn't a great sight reader, but I didn't need to be because I just learned the show. So I would learn a 2.5 hour show and have the notes there to remind me.
Yes.
And so I get into doing this. So I'm doing this. I'm helping at the studio, and then a mate of mine, John, from the youth group. His dad was the vicar of the church. Rog was the youth pastor. He says, "Hey, playing at this church. Actually, it was Riverside Vineyard Church,
the one we're in.
We're in now, different building. It was
Okay, but same church.
Same church. Brian Dwayne was leading worship, and John Brown says to me, "Hey, Calum, do you want to come and just play drums? We're short of a drummer." So I go and play drums. Now, this would be 97, 98.
Okay, so
96 perhaps, 97.
So John Brown, like from Integrity, JB?
No, not that JB.
Okay,
different JB.
Okay, different JB.
This JB now works in film.
Okay,
but he was a piano player, and I think how it goes is, here's the story. Brian Dirksen arrived on the shores and asked every vineyard to record their worship time. So it wasn't like stick a phone up. This was, you had to get a VCR recording camera in to do this, and recorded all the services. I think that's where he put together his conference team, which became the band for Come Now's the Time and those albums. So he's saying, he's just asking different things. So who's this drummer? And no one knew, because I wasn't part of the church. They just recorded the night that I'd come in and depped.
Yeah.
With Brian Dwayne leading and John Brown playing playing piano. So no one knew. So it took a while for Brian to track me down, and then chat with Brian, and he said, we want to set up this conference team, and so I'm, oh well, that's nice. What's that all about then? And I'm part of a church in London, an Anglican church, and he says, well, we're going to go around to different churches. We're going to create music, create worship space, and do ministry, and we're going to write a bunch of songs and see what the Lord does. So my first thing is, well, how much does it pay, and what are the dates?
Yes.
And he says, well, the pay thing, we'll cover your board, we'll give you somewhere to sleep and get gas money. But I'm a gigging musician, so it's a bit of a leap of faith for me to go, yeah, all right, I'll sign up for this.
Yeah.
And then that becomes then the Come Now Is the Time recording team.
Yes.
And Hungry and Surrender and all the holy stuff, and all the late 90s stuff were there. So it was purely by me depping with a friend of mine who I knew from youth, and who happened to have that recording.
And then you end up playing on all these iconic records.
Yeah, iconic.
They really are.
Yeah,
I think
there's something here we touched today about this voice. There's something about those which Brian, I think, in his genius, recognizing what is in someone else, having a sense that what someone is presenting is not fully who they are. When he recognizes that, he does everything he can to create space for that to happen. And then he curates it. That's been my experience with Brian. I'll come up with ideas, and to this day, I still have. If I'm doing stuff, like even now, we've just had a time of worship, and I in my head I can start getting creative with things, and doing stuff and not using sticks and using, I don't know, a towel to hit a drum or whatever it is. You start getting creative. And in my head, I still hear this, Calum.
Back it off.
And it's the voice of the Dirk.
Yeah. He's just editing.
In my head.
He's editing. We're thousands of miles from him right now, but he's there.
Yeah, and it's just that because I learned to trust his voice. I learned to trust his voice in my life when it came to playing. So say Iconic. Okay, I'm still the hungry drummer. Haven't eaten for years. So the original recording of Hungry, that was actually supposed to be Dave Lasquinios playing drums on that, who we shared drums and percussion on that. We would swap. You do some kit, I'll do some percussion. We would swap around. And for whatever reason, Catherine said, "Hey, Calum, do that thing that you were doing."
An intro.
Just because I was just tuning up and setting the kit and do that thing. So I did that groove, and she said, "Okay, so I'm going to play this. So you have to," and that became that rhythm. That became the rhythm that opens the whole album.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there at our little listening party, and Brian putting it on, and I wondered why he was looking at me, because he was doing the Brian look of like, Calum. But it was a slightly different look. And then the whole album just starts with this drum loop, and it's except it's me playing it, just not actually a loop.
Yeah.
But he looks at me and he gives me a wink, and there's something about this shared creativity that seemed to be quite a dangerous move. You don't start an album with a drum groove. Why would you do that? That's just, you would set it up. You don't just drop that on them.
I love it.
Yeah, and that was the days pre-automation, pre-computers. There was 8 pairs of hands on the desk to do all the mutes and run the faders, and they're running it old school style. But out of that comes this creativity. But there's something about being a trusted voice in the curation of spaces of worship. And I realized actually that's what's always been happening with my expression of worship. When I used to go see Dad as a kid and see a few thousand people lost in music, it's connecting them, it's connecting to something other than their experience of life.
Yeah.
So then years later, mid-90s, so this is kind of, mid-90s I start playing with Brian. Dad gets a gig with a little bar band called AC/DC.
This is still crazy to me.
And Thunderstruck is born.
So your dad played on the Thunderstruck?
He's Mr. Thunderstruck. Go see the Chris Slade Timeline, wherever they're playing. They're playing in Worthing, June 24th, I believe.
Yeah.
So, he gets this gig. He's a gigging drummer. And I think the whole thing is friends know people. And I think the route to AC/DC for him was playing for Uriah Heep back in the day. And one of the musicians from that. And then there's a saxophonist called Mick Ralphs. Bad Company, was it? I can't remember. And they happen to have the same management company as Gary Moore. And then Gary Moore leads to Dave Gilmour, which then leads, I think, or it's the other way around, into the management of AC/DC. And there's the whole story there. So, it's gigging drummer. Still is. Mid-70s now. Go on, Dad. He's still doing gigs left, right, and center.
I love that.
Yeah.
I so love that. I just love that. In some ways, you and your dad have these parallel stories. I just can't get away from this. They're like parallel tracks. He's got a different life or a different lane than you, but the origin story is insanely freaky to me. And then even now, some of what you've been saying and just what you said about your dad, it's like there are these communities that surround you. Yeah. These relationships and these.
I haven't heard it actually. I haven't reflected on that in such a succinct way. Yeah. Of there being repeated story with different outcome.
Yeah.
Right. With a little tweak.
A little tweak.
There.
It's the Jesus tweak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Jesus has always been. Community has always been present. Church community has always been present. I think Dad's experience of church would be somewhat alienating because it's Welsh Chapel, and so you're expected to behave a certain way.
Yeah.
And if you haven't got faith in the middle of that, that's quite an alien experience.
And your dad's a rocker.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, he's Mr. Thunderstruck.
Yeah. I remember when he played at the wedding, Graham Ward was we had Brian Thiessen on bass, Graham Ward on guitar, and I was playing drums, and Joyce got fed up. Said, Calum, come down and let Dad play. So Dad gets up there, and I remember speaking to Graham.
This is at your wedding?
Yeah.
This is too good.
Yeah, so Dad's there, and they're playing blues stuff. Graham Ord, of course, just what an encyclopedic. Another son of a gifted musician who's a job in muso, and speaks to me 4 or 5 days after the wedding. He said, "My ears are still ringing. I have not heard anyone embody a drum kit like your old man."
That's so
he
good.
Just takes out the wall.
He brings it.
Yeah.
He puts his person in it.
So I think that aspect as well, that's something that perhaps I have taken on or I've given voice to in myself, because I haven't seen a drummer take hold of a band like my dad has. Like to drive Madison Square Gardens, you've got to be a big personality.
You're putting it in.
Yeah. You are changing the atmosphere for 20,000 people.
I so love this. Okay, so I just have this feeling.
Am I late?
No, but I have a feeling it's coming, right?
It's coming, yeah.
So for those of you who are listening, we're having this podcast while Harmony's talking, and I know that ministry time is coming, and I'm going to get a text from Melissa saying Calum has to come back.
It's good.
Yeah. So here's what I would love. We'll just have to do another episode. I already know this, but let's do this for a moment before we get that text. Calum, will you talk to the musicians, not even the worship leaders, but the musicians who listen to this podcast? Would you say, what do you want to say to the drummers and just the musicians and like the men and women who know in their soul that their real job is not behind the microphone, but it's behind the person who's behind the microphone?
Man, and I'm crying now.
Oh, so, are you?
Yeah.
Dude, that touches something. Yeah.
I think I see a bunch of things that is not given voice to, right?
Yeah.
And so you interact with a medium, music, and you see a cause and effect, and you go, so much gets in the way before you can get to do the voice. There's so much holding us back. There's so much stopping us from doing it. And you have to realize that once you play that first note on the piano or strum that guitar or bang a tabletop and your heart connects to it, you have to give voice to that. And that will affect what happens around you. It will affect it massively. It's this whole chain reaction to anything, to everything. And so for me to be in a space and be trusted with being in front of people, just give your all in that. Don't worry that you're going off click. Don't worry that you're in a booth. Don't worry that you feel isolated in your in-ear world. Be present to who you are in that moment, and just as much as you can let go of all the things that we put in front of us that hinder us in giving our voice. And it comes from putting your head on the pillow, I think, and hearing the voice of the Father saying, "You are enough right now," before you get out of bed. And I have this practice of doing this because days do not go the way I think they will most of the time. And so before I get out of bed, I just open my eyes and I go, "God, are you there?" And most of the time I don't hear anything. So I go, okay, I'm just going to assume you are.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to be not very British and assume the best. And I've learned that from...
Oh, that is too good.
I've learned that
I love
from my US buddies and my Canadian buddies.
Yes.
And learning different culture where...
Yes.
Why would it all go to pot? Well, in the UK, we've got a whole history of why it goes to pot.
Yes.
And coming from Wales,
yes,
it all goes to pot. All of it. So if it's all going to pot, if it's all going to go, if we're all damned, then be completely who you are. It doesn't matter. And then when you're doing that, so my ramble is, if you've got this thing in you, whatever it is, but with music particularly, give voice to it and don't be controlled by what you think needs to happen. Find a pub to play in. Session ales.
Yes.
I learned about why session ales came about the other day. It blew my mind. It's fantastic.
Keep having them, baby.
Yeah. We're going to brew a lower alcohol beer so the musicians can drink all night and stay upright.
That's right.
That's why we're doing session ales. So come and have a beer and the music. But wherever you can find space to do it. And it's not, don't put, what's the classic thing about you don't have to put a cross on the shoe for it to be known as a Christian shoe.
Right.
But just be expressive with whatever that is. Of course, my three biggest influences for me, giving voice to my dad, a big what's up to him, because he had the potential to be a drummer or not. Doesn't matter what it was going to be. He wasn't going to be playing drums. It wasn't on the cards for him.
Yeah.
He got out of that by being a drummer. He fought his way out the corner being a drummer, and he still plays like that to this day. It's incredible to watch
some desperation in there.
Yeah, it's like
hunger.
I am just, this is it. And so to not have that expression in your life, you're not being true to who you are. And I think that's what happens with me. Like, why am I getting emotional about this? Because for me, I'm realizing it's more about the core of my being, that if I don't do this, I'm missing out on who I am.
Well, you said something to me last night, if it's okay for me to mention.
Please.
You were just talking about, like, because you're a pastor now.
Yes.
Yeah, you're
I'm respectable.
Yeah,
I've moved from being a drummer to a pastor.
Yeah, but you were talking to me last night about you're just feeling that twinge of I can't let go completely of the drums. I have to.
Well, I have to. I know for me, I have to have
keep
intentional
this
space.
Yeah,
and I don't have time because pastoring is a people job.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm a good and effective pastor.
Yes,
but I'm not being fully who I am. So I think people will get a better pastor the more I'm me.
Right.
And so for me to not be me means I can't be fully who they want me to be.
Yeah. Having a foot in two different worlds, there's this amphibious quality to your vocation.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And whether it's in theatre or whether it is in a pub or in a church, this thing of community and music is the thing that drives me all along. And so I have to find ways to give voice to that. I've thought for years I should just pick up the guitar because that will solve a number of scheduling problems, challenges in church community life. But feeling very assured that that's not my voice. But it's it's the easiest gig in the world to lead worship. It's
yes.
ridiculously easy.
Yes.
It's harder now because there's a production value.
Yeah.
And I understand why the production value is there, but it gets in the way because we don't have the learning curve. We just expect people to be present in who they are with all of this isolation and blah, 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 blah.
Right.
So it was interesting in taking our national gathering for the Vineyard in Canada last year. And one of the things I stipulated was there's floor wedges for monitors so we can talk.
Yes.
And it was oh yeah, great, okay.
Let's
and
do
you
it.
figure it out, But anyway, so I think it's there is something, as you've asked that question, what would be my encouragement, or what is it about musicians? Why am I getting emotional about it? That is perhaps I haven't been asked. Perhaps there's something to that about not being asked.
No, I know that. I guess I just want to say it this way. I know that a lot of people who listen to this podcast are pastors,
right,
or they're worship leaders, and they do the thing every week. They stand in front of the microphone. But I know that there's another group of people who listen to this podcast, and they're behind the person who's behind the microphone.
Yeah,
and they're precious people.
Yeah.
And I know that there's even this other group who, like you, have a heart for Jesus and they love the church, but they have gifts that extend maybe beyond the church.
Oh yeah.
And I just wanted you to say whatever it is you want to say, because those people need to hear that there's Jesus out there.
Yeah.
I mean, there's Jesus in the church, but there's also Jesus.
So here's an experience. How many times you walk down a road, like London, you get lots of buskers, Calgary, you get lots of buskers, and my attention is completely held by this busker. Could be, like a bucket player, could be whoever. And I start crying. I start feeling this sense of worship coming out of me. There's no words perhaps, or it's just someone singing whatever song, doesn't matter. There's something about their heart that I'm connecting with. And it's nothing to do with church. It's nothing to do with Jesus. I love our expression within the church, but we miss the expression of what God is doing in other people without them declaring Jesus. There's something about this common human experience.
Yes.
And it's in us, and we will give voice to it. And so those that are bagmen, I love the films. They're standing in the shadows, and this place of the industry it takes to create stars. To be a star is not a normal thing. It's created. It's usually oh yeah, Bob. He's the singer. What's his name? Bob Dylan. Oh yeah, he's just a singer. But we create these infrastructures that create the celebrity, and that's not actually what we're built for.
Yeah.
It's down the pub together. It's at the graveside singing a hymn together. but we need our artists to do that. We need the bagmen to come along. We need someone setting up the chairs. We need
somebody who facilitates it.
We need venues. My goodness.
Say more about that. Yeah.
Well, venues, the Ticketmaster world. I remember the time I was in Vancouver, so many venues shut down that were 500 to 700 seaters. So the only option was a 100-seater or a 2,500-seater. And so if you're a gigging band and you start getting local knowledge and you start getting to play, you have to do a 2,500-seater.
Yeah, you cap out. The jump is...
You can't do it.
Yeah.
And then just to go and see bands, live music. Anyway, culture's moved on from all of that, so there's no point in me standing on the hill shaking my fists. How do we then do it? Well, then it's countercultural. Then we have to be guerrillas. We have to be guerrilla musicians. And I think more and more we have to be guerrilla musicians in the church. I think music just has to break out in the lobby. That my goal for next year is to put together a hotel lobby band doing covers. Girl from Ipanema on steroids. And I think that's going to be my...
Do you have an idea of who those people are already?
I've got a little inkling.
You got an inkling.
Of perhaps... And it's the people, and it's some bagmen.
Yes.
We need some bag people to come in and sit with us and just have a night with us.
Oh, man.
And just experience the experience. We'll probably be doing a few more hymns and beers in pubs. Certainly at Christmas, I'm going to get onto that one because everyone loves singing carols and hymns and again community and just get the church drinking again. There you go. There's my vineyard night. And it's
that's my platform.
That's my platform. Yeah.
Calum for president. Get people drinking again.
Come on, people.
Yes, dude. Thank you for just sharing some of your story, and I mean, just thank you for the way you've. I just want to say this, like one of the things that I'm hearing, and I heard through everything you shared tonight is I just heard you sharing, like you have this one foot always in these two different worlds, and there's something about how it's like prophetic. Like there's that part of you that's in the Virgin Studios studio, but there's also the Calum at the same time who's at the youth group, and that does something, you know. I mean, a lot of times I think a lot of times, especially in the church, we just assume we have to choose a lane, you know.
Yeah.
I have all these things I love, but if I'm going to follow Jesus, the cross I carry is I'm going to give up my music, or I'm going to give up my instrument, or I'm going to give up this.
Well,
you have
to holify it, and you don't have to holify it.
And that's what I love about your story is that you've increasingly followed Jesus, and yet He's allowed you to increasingly give expression to who you truly are, and like the fire that's inside of you that comes through musical expression. It's like essential. It's like there's something there that's just essential, and I don't know. I think that's going to be encouraging to a lot of people.
Well, I hope so. I think and I think there's something. This is what I love about your podcast in particular. The Ferment podcast is it's a podcast of narrative, and without narrative, we're just zeros and ones, right?
Yeah.
Without that narrative that comes through, so
story creatures.
Yeah, and so we're part of the story.
Yeah.
So write your chapter.
That's right. Amen. Dude, you're welcome on this podcast anytime, because I have like 18 more things I want to ask you about, and some of it definitely has to do with your dad. We're going to have to get him in here at some point, cuz
tell you.
Dude, we have got to do that. All right, hey, right here. High
Come
five.
On. All right.
Boom.
Hey everyone, Casey Corum here, producer of the podcast. Thanks for listening. As always, if you've been enjoying the podcast, here's a few ways you can help us. First of all, leave us a review on the podcast platform of your choice. This helps more people find us. Also, connect with us on social media. Instagram at The Ferment Podcast and Twitter at FermentCast. All right, everyone, thanks for listening. See you next week. Peace.